guys? Welcome to Bada Boom. It's a very special episode, a day we've been waiting for a while. James Gunn has announced their slate of DC movies, and most importantly, and much to the chagrin of Michael, there is a Booster Gold TV series. So we're going to spend about an hour talking about Booster Gold, who could be cast in it, who should write it, who should direct it. I'm actually kidding. We're going to go through the entire slate, give our thoughts. There's definitely some through lines and stuff, but for most of this, the creative teams haven't been announced, so it's hard to see where the stories are going to go outside of a select few projects. But yeah, it's me, Chris. We have Troy, and then we also have our top hater. We had to call him in to get a balanced view, which is Mike.
Yeah,
hater in chief himself.
Mike.
Hater in chief. I think we've tried to mold this show into something where we're both very positive, but I think we should kind of go more into like sports debate shows where we have someone very negative that just is the contrarian for the contrarian's sake, which is Michael.
Well, I wouldn't go so far as to describe myself as a contrarian just for contrarian's sake, but I would definitely describe myself as bringing a bit of a unique perspective to this particular episode, because I'm not in terms of being for a general audience. They might mean something a little different for me than they might mean for you guys, because you guys are very deep into the DC universe already, and I'm just not. So looking at these announcements, I bring kind of like the more general audience perspective to kind of how they would feel for the general audience.
I think that's pretty important for both Chris and I, who are very deep into the DC universe. But also, you passed the test, Michael. You are contrary for contrary purposes. You didn't disagree with us, or you disagreed with us that you were. So
That's right. That's exactly what I had in mind.
Yeah, and you went on for a long time to say that you're a hater. I think in the sake of podcasting and storytelling, you should deliver things and as few words as you can for the listeners and the readers. So thank you, Michael, for wasting everyone's time. We will jump right into it. And we're going to share an article. Yesterday there was an event where they had press over, so this is very obviously connected, and they organized this in a way that everyone releases things at the same time. There wasn't any leaks. There's also a video that James Gunn put out, which is very fun. Maybe we react to it, maybe we don't. I don't know. We're getting used to this whole YouTube thing, and so come on, let's do it. Would you look at that? All technology. Right. Technology. So we will start this by reading this article word for word. And then we will each give a in-depth analysis of every paragraph and stanza. So let's get right into it. What's huge is obviously something we knew was coming was Superman. It's one of the few things that actually has a release date. If you look, it's actually July 11th, 2025. Which is exciting. James Gunn is going to be writing it. I think that's why it has a date, because there's actually like work being done on the script right now. And it will be called Superman Legacy. I don't think there's any stories named after it, but I suspect they use Legacy so that people don't tie it to something like All-Star Superman or anything like that. What do you guys think about Superman?
Well, the most interesting... Yeah, go ahead, Troy.
I'm not really looking forward to it too much, because I think everyone's still a little burned around Henry Cavill, and while I think that I do agree with James Gunn that Henry Cavill is not the best choice for this movie, with the story he wants to tell. I still think I need to know okay, well, who is gonna play him, and it seems like there's just not a lot enough for me to be super excited about it. I need more. I need some more concrete details. Maybe once the trailer comes out, I'll be like, all right, this looks really dope. But right now I'm kind of just we're in the early stages. I'm gonna just be a little negative about it, and then I'll change my tune once I have a little bit more. Hopefully, I'm not gonna have high expectations.
I know Mike will disagree with this, but we haven't had a good Superman movie in like 40 years. So I'm excited with the prospects of it being a good one. I know you like Man of Steel. We saw it in the theater 10 years ago, Mike, and I was like, I don't know about this. So I'm excited for it. What do you think, Mike?
Well, it's actually been 12 years. Oh, sorry. No, it's going to be 12 years when Superman Legacy releases. It's slated
Yeah,
for
yeah.
2025. Man of Steel came out in so it'd be 12 years before that. So that would mean 12 years in between the films. And I think that's the kind of craziest part of the whole thing, is that it's taken that long for just a standalone Superman film, who is, as even James Gunn says in the article, it's the diamond of the property. And for it to take so long to have another standalone film is the real highlight for me. I did like Man of Steel. I didn't originally, I loved it. Then I kind of thought about it a little bit more, and I still like the especially the elements of his upbringing, where he's a little kid and he's trying to fit in with the world. And it seems that's kind of what they want to focus on in this one as well. But the other thing that I found interesting is James Gunn talking about why they let Henry Cavill go, and he basically just said, like, it's not a film for him. And I don't really know what that means, except I hope it doesn't mean that James Gunn is going to try to make Superman kind of like a comical character with one-liners and things like that. Because then, yeah, it definitely wouldn't be for Henry Cavill, because Henry Cavill isn't very like a comedic actor. But we know so little about it at this point that I'm just hopeful that they can make it not like Man of Steel and not like Batman versus Superman. Make it a little bit more in that James Gunn vein of it being just like a fun movie, a real crowd pleaser. And just in general, that's why I'm happy that they have James Gunn at the helm of the ship, because he knows what the audience wants. And you can kind of make fun of him for his dialogue choices and things like that, but he knows how to make a crowd pleaser. So I'm fairly confident that that's exactly what Superman Legacy is going to be.
Yeah, just play the hits, man. Play the hits. And I think, sort of going back to the Henry Cavill thing, I think what he was saying, and rightfully so, he was throwing around the previous regime under the bus. He was like, "Hey, Henry wasn't fired. He was never cast."
Exactly.
So he was like, "Hey, like, I'm sorry what he was put through with the previous regime and The Rock and all that, but the reality is he never was a part of that plan." And it sucks that the way it had to go, but that's where we're at. And it's something that obviously people are really attached to his portrayal, but how many people get to play a role for 10 years? So I think he had a pretty good run, especially considering none of the movies he was in was a runaway success. They could have easily rebooted it like 3 or 4 times, 5 times in the last 10 years. So, and kind of passing that and talking about what the plan is, I think what's interesting is, instead of phases, what DC is going to have is chapters. So this first chapter is going to be called Gods and Monsters. I think maybe it kind of puts some things in perspective, just because one of the first projects is this animated series that's going to be written by James Gunn, which is the Creature Commandos. I think that's Weasel from the Suicide Squad.
Yeah,
If
I think that
so,
is.
I'm really excited to see that, because I love that character in that movie, which is really cool. Yeah,
I think it's
Frankenstein. I wonder if this is Rick Flag
oh,
Senior. That would be really cool and a fun way to tie it to the Suicide Squad and stuff like that. But what do you think about this? I'm excited for it. To have like an animated series written by James Gunn, I think it could be really weird, and crazy. And hopefully we get more of Weasel. I love that character. The 5 minutes he's in Suicide Squad. So what do you think?
I think we definitely will get more, but I think it's also really smart to have things be called chapters for the DCU. I think Marvel would have benefited with that for Phase 4 because there was a large theme throughout this entire Phase 4 of like, you know, mourning the loss of loved ones, kind of, and almost every movie I walked into in this past Phase 4, I was like, oh, it's going to be different from the last one. There's going to be like a different message, and like, it's mostly the same message, just from different characters' perspectives, and it kind of left me being like, yo, I've seen this like 5 different times.
Yeah.
So now when I walk into a theater and I'm like, okay, we're in Gods and Monsters chapter, I'll be like, all right, how am I going to look at this in a different way than I did all the other movies? And like, my expectations will just be in a better spot, I feel.
Yeah. There are gods and there are monsters. That is what we're learning. What's interesting, and I think this is going to be the case with DC Studios now, James Gunn and Peter Safran are looking over film, TV, animation, and games, which is really unique. It's very similar to the power Kevin Feige has over at Disney with Marvel. But this little piece of information, I think, is going to apply to it. The voice actors have yet to be cast, but the executives are looking to find people who can voice the animated characters and also portray the live action versions when the anti-heroes show up in the movies and shows. So as different as this animated series feels, it's going to be connected and they will appear in different things. So that's exciting. And I had read somewhere, obviously I have to confirm it. It's, and not that I have someone at DC to confirm this, but the actors, the deals they're looking for with these actors, and obviously is very similar to what Marvel does, but this is going to be a little different. Those contracts are going to look to have those actors portray it in live action, animation, and games. So you'll have a consistent portrayal across all different mediums, which would be fun because I think part of the failure of Marvel's The Avengers was the fact that they, try to make it like the movies, but the character models looked almost like the stunt doubles of the actors, and the voices didn't match. So I think that immediately turned people off. And this would be unique if there is, like sometimes we immediately think when it comes to games, like what would be a great Batman game? What would be a great Superman game? I think Creature Commandos would be an awesome video game just because there's no preconceived notion of what it should be. And you have all these characters that have unique abilities and skill sets that you could kind of play around with. But that'd be going too far. I think we might have lost Mike, but he might be in the background like hating or something like that. So
yeah, we're gonna get another spin-off of a spin-off. We had Peacemaker be a spin-off of Suicide Squad, and now Waller is gonna get her own show, which hopefully that's gonna shine another light on some of these lesser known heroes and villains in the Suicide Squad. I think that's a great team that just highlight like those lesser known heroes that have stories that we don't hear every day, and hopefully we'll get to keep in touch with some like of the darker parts of the DC universe through the Waller spinoff.
Yeah, Mike should be jumping back in, but I think what's cool is that and again, these are things, it's very much in flux, but Flashpoint is going to reset the DC universe. Part of the thing that I'd seen is that the ending had Michael Keaton's Batman, Wonder Woman, and Supergirl, but they're looking to refilm that because Aquaman 3 after Aquaman 2 is still going to happen with Jason Momoa. You have Waller, which is still going to have Viola Davis and be tied into that Peacemaker universe, where you have it set, and it's going to be set between season 1 and season 2 of Peacemaker, which is really disappointing because I need Peacemaker season 2 or a Vigilante show. So the fact that this is happening in between those means I have to wait longer, which is not something I'm very happy about. But what's really cool is that you have Crystal Henry, who was on the Watchmen series, and Jeremy Carver, the creator of Doom Patrol, which of all the DC series that have come out lately, I think that's one that has gotten universal praise. So let's, fingers crossed that we see Brendan Fraser appear in some way in that.
Yeah.
Superman Legacy, we've already talked about that. But I think what's cool is that, to kind of read the quote, it's not an origin story. Peter Safran said it focuses on Superman balancing his Kryptonian heritage with his human upbringing. He is the embodiment of truth, justice, and the American way. He is the kindness in a world that thinks that kindness is old-fashioned. So he won't be snapping necks in this, which is really exciting. Something we're both really excited for is Lanterns. And what's great about this, it's still a TV series, but Greg Berlanti, who made a name for himself with the Berlantiverse, and that Arrowverse, his series that he'd been working on for years at this point, at the beginning of the HBO Max, it has been scrapped. So, they're going to get a new creative team. It's going to follow Hal and John, which is really exciting. It's going to be a true detective style story, which I've told people for years that that's the way they should approach it. So please send me my check in the mail, DC. If not, you'll be hearing from my legal representation. But this is really exciting because, from the quote, it's supposed to be set kind of in its own sector of the DC universe. But what Hal and John are going to be investigating is going to be something very important to the larger DCU. So it would be really cool if they're the ones to find out about a darker evil, maybe a Blackest Night, maybe a dark side, and them finding that is what sort of is the catalyst for them to come back to Earth and be like, dude, you guys have no idea what's coming. Which, funny enough, was kind of the plan in the Snyder cut, where they had filmed a scene with Jon Stewart that eventually was replaced with Martian Manhunter. So I think that's really cool.
And for so long we haven't had anything of like a cosmic nature for DC, and the Lanterns are all about that, and we're gonna finally get that element more so in the DCU. So I'm really excited about the Lanterns and the Authority. Dude, the Authority just sounds like we're talking about the boys again.
Yeah, the Authority would be really cool. When we touch on the Batman thing, it is very clear that with these first projects is very much inspired by Grant Morrison's work. I think Legacy is a stand-in for All-Star Superman. I've seen James Gunn post that book. Today is actually Grant Morrison's birthday. So I don't know if that's connected, but it is a very happy birthday for Grant Morrison, seeing their work come to the screen. So this is going to be cool. I wonder, it is a movie, so it's going to be strange to get to this point where you have an Authority movie. I don't know when it's going to come out. Obviously, these don't have dates, but it's going to be one of those things. It's like, wait, we have an Authority movie before we know who Wonder Woman is and stuff like that. So it's a cast of characters I think comic book fans know, and DC's been emphasizing them more and more in the comics. But it's definitely going to be something that has to be really, really good for people to attach themselves, I find. But it also is the opportunity to have, a gay superhero in Midnighter. You have Apollo, so there's those opportunities, and I think it's gonna be good. The way Gunn is describing it is like he kind of wants it like Jack Nicholson in A Few Good Men, which is a great elevator pitch for me. Mike is back, so we could kind of get into the Booster Gold stuff now. But as I said, complain about that Wonder Woman thing. The next thing on the docket is Paradise Lost, which is a Game of Thrones style drama set on the all-female island that is Wonder Woman's birthplace, Themyscira. It says it takes place before the events of the Wonder Woman film, so I wonder, with Momoa, and they touched on Ezra Miller and they said they can come back as the Flash. So if Ezra could come back, please let Gal come back because but I also think they're just hedging their bets. You know, as someone that is in recovery, I don't think they want to fire them to set them on a path of destruction before that movie comes out.
They
So
also want Ezra to like be on his best behavior, and like anything of future promises of like a job, I think also like means, oh yeah, I'll be on my best behavior. I can potentially make more money in the future. Yes, I will. But if it's like,
yeah,
oh, after this movie I'm done, like they won't be like holding on to very much.
yeah, exactly. But what do you guys think of Paradise Lost? I think this is kind of the stuff that was missing out of um, the last version of the DC universe. There wasn't very much things connected outside of the movies, and some of the best parts of the Woman movies were on Themyscira. Sometimes you were like, "Hey, can you stay here for a minute?"
Yeah,
I
I think.
think, yeah, go ahead,
Oh
Trip.
no, Mike, please go.
I think House of the Dragon isn't doing so hot, so maybe this will bring back some of that Game of Thrones magic. I mean, they even straight up said that this is inspired by Game of Thrones, and every network wants a Game of Thrones show. And so it's kind of funny that HBO also wants, because I'm going to go ahead and assume that this is going to be on HBO Max. So it's interesting that they want another Game of Thrones show, even though they actually have the actual Game of Thrones canon in House of the Dragon. So it's not terribly surprising that they want a show like this because every network wants a show like this. I mean, there's probably like 15 ripoffs of Game of Thrones on Netflix as it is. So it's not particularly surprising. And I think the fiction supports it. You can have the crazy costumes and the crazy lore. So it's definitely a good call on their part in terms of bringing people into the universe. And also you can get very detailed in shows like this, all the families, all the background, and you can really immerse people in that universe, and then you can use it as a springboard for the movies. So it's a great decision on their part.
Yeah. Um,
I
like
don't know much about like the what Wonder Woman's life was prior to leaving the island. So, maybe we'll get some potentially like new lore or learn about some old lore through the series. But uh I don't have very high hopes for this because it's like that island is supposed to be like the best place on the world for them. And it's like their own private island. And like, yeah, sure, there's always conflict and like differences and things like that, but it's always been portrayed as a very wonderful place. So the only thing I can kind of think of, and it would be interesting to see, is, what if there are other gods trying to come to the island to stir up trouble and try and bring down the island in some sort of way. But
hopefully they recast Ares because I think Nigel Thornberry
oh
as
yeah,
Ares was a terrible move that people still make fun of. Even though that movie's great. Yeah, and I think the good thing about this is that they don't necessarily have to go into Wonder Woman's life. Like, you could introduce Wonder Girl. You can just do the story about the women on the island. You don't even have to really touch on Wonder Woman, and it'll be interesting to see who they hire for these things. I think as log lines and elevator pitches, they sound great. I mean, if you put Game of Thrones style next to anything, people executives are like, great, but who are you hiring? Are
yeah.
you hiring, um, a great creative team to bring that to life? And I think they've even struggled to replicate that magic, so it's not easy. And yeah, I think they've like Mike said, every network is like, hey, can you get me Stranger Things or Game of Thrones? It's like, well, if it was that easy, you'd have a second Stranger Things or a second
Yeah.
Game of Thrones. So it is always funny when they throw those things around, and I'm excited to actually see Lanterns because it'd be funny if they figure out a way to make a good True Detective story. When True Detective hasn't been able to do that in like 10 years. But the next thing on the docket, which is the thing I'm most excited for, even this supersedes Booster Gold, is The Brave and the Bold. This is going to be a Batman movie. This is going to be the introduction of the DCU's Batman. So we're getting a Batman that's not Robert Pattinson. That will be an Elseworld story. And it will introduce a Robin. This will have Damian Wayne as Robin. So again, happy birthday, Grant Morrison, because another story and character that they had a very good imprint on. But I'm excited for this because this means we might get Professor Pig. We might get a Robin that slashes people's heads off and stuff like that. And is described as a father-son story, and I think that's unique because Damian is actually Batman's real son. Whereas he has a lot of orphan children and stuff like that. It'll be a fun, unique thing, and I think that is what will separate this from the Batman. The Batman could still be detective stories. Maybe they introduce a Robin if they want to do it, but what's good about not bringing that world into this is that could be its own thing, and obviously it has been successful. How do you make people go and see another Batman?
Yeah.
And this is exactly it, making it a father-son story, hopefully very fun and colorful, and still have that grounded and take. So hopefully they hire someone soon, because this is the thing I'm kind of most excited for. So I hire a writer and director already. What do you guys think about this? Because obviously it's another Batman, so it's hard to kind of talk about, especially considering literally 2025 is the Batman. Can you come out with another Batman movie in a year or two?
This is where I have to get on my soapbox and talk about why no Batman Beyond. Because
Oh
as
my
you
gosh,
said,
yes.
you made the perfect point of, oh, it's just another Batman story. Batman Beyond fixes that problem entirely, because it's so much different from the rest of the franchise as we've seen it so far in live action, especially. And it's interesting to me that they're going with this route, where it is his father-son relationship. That's also a very significant aspect of Batman Beyond. And I was looking, because I've always been surprised that they haven't done it. And I get people always say, "Oh, well, it's expensive. It's expensive." Listen, if Netflix can make 2 seasons of Altered Carbon, then I think DC can make 1 season of Batman Beyond. And you don't have to make it super futuristic. You can pull back a little bit, make it like a near future setting. But the core aspects of older Batman passing the torch to a younger Batman, I think is a phenomenal story that would really work, especially in this kind of new universe that they're trying to create. And I think probably the reason they're not going to do it is because they want it to be, like I said, part of that universe. It's going to be this cinematic universe that they're creating, and having Batman Beyond just wouldn't fit in with the other aspects of that universe that they're trying to do. They obviously want kind of like a younger Batman, not an older Batman like he is in Batman Beyond. So I would assume that's probably the biggest reason for it. If this DC universe was set a little bit further in the future, then maybe we would have gotten Batman Beyond. But the way it's being currently set up, we're having a younger Batman, and the father-son relationship is going to be a literal father-son relationship. So from what they're talking about, it seems like an interesting enough idea. I don't like the name. When I first saw the name, I immediately thought of the Bold and the Brave, which is a daytime soap opera. So I don't know. Maybe they need to work a little bit on that. But
I mean, The Brave and the Bold is a famous title. The animated series is amazing, and again, because they have a movie called The Batman, they have to find a way to kind of. I think they're trying to do the Man of Steel thing, where you're like, hey, I think this is something obviously very associated with the brand without calling it Superman. So I get why they're calling it that. I think maybe as they get closer. They may go the route of calling it Batman and Robin. I think they should have learned from their mistake of Birds of Prey. I think Birds of Prey wasn't as successful because it wasn't called Harley Quinn and the Birds of Prey. It was called Birds of Prey and the Emancipation of the fantabulous Harley Quinn or something like that. And I think that confused people. They're like, is it a Birds of Prey movie? Is it a Harley Quinn? So I think they definitely take a risk there. But people are excited to see a Batman and Robin movie. Me, as a dad, I'm excited to kind of see that because as much as my son loves the Batman, I think it's going to create a very violent son. I think he likes snapping people's necks and stuff like that at this point. But yeah, and this leads to, and funny enough, I think one of the last things where like it's funny when people like especially creative executives get like fired, there's always these leaks like, hey, if you would have let me stay on the job like a little bit longer, you would have gotten this. It was leaked that, hey, Batman Beyond with Michael Keaton was in the works. So I don't think it was. I think it was just like, hey, like if I'm gonna get fired, I'm just gonna make sure that you guys knew I did have a plan. And if you had let me realize my plan, which will be funny when, Dwayne Johnson in a week is like, hey, in Shazam 3 would have been me and Black Adam versus Shazam. So I don't think that was ever in the works. But, what is interesting is that, they've brought back Elseworlds, that brand. That's something that had disappeared. They call everything Black Label now in DC Comics, and Elseworlds obviously very popular for Kingdom Come, some great stories like Superman Red Sun and stuff like that. I think there is an opportunity still, and Michael Keaton has to be really happy. He gets to play Batman one more time. I think what was really like damning about this whole thing is that they were asked about Batgirl, and I think it was Safran who said his like, yeah, that movie was unreleasable. Actually, it took a lot of courage to cancel that movie. I was like, damn, how bad was that movie? So for them to openly be like, dude, if you think Justice League killed the DCU, this would have done it.
Yeah.
So
I'm just excited, or I'm wanting just as much to have a Batman Beyond movie, but I think you're totally right, Michael. Like, we've got no franchise built at the moment to like prop that up, and it would be a one-off. And I would rather us wait, unfortunately, maybe like 10 years and get 2 to 3 Batman Beyond movies instead of just one that is just, kind of okay, I think. So I think the waiting will pay off, hopefully.
Yeah, I hope so. And actually, speaking of Elseworlds, you brought that up, Chris, and I just wanted to get both of your opinions on it because, as a kind of person on the outside looking in, it's always been confusing to me with what DC is doing because it's so all over the place. While Marvel has this very consistent vision for everything in that universe, and you don't have to worry about there being, 3 different Thors at the same time or anything like that. And they seem to be doubling down on it a little bit from what they're saying, because we're going to have, the Brave and the Bold, and we're going to have the Batman Part 2 at the same time. So you're having 2 conflicting Batmans. And when I was thinking about it, do you think that's a long-term plan, the Elseworlds initiative, just because, the Batman with Robert Pattinson and the Joker with Joaquin Phoenix is so popular that they're just going to try to wrap that up and then wrap up the whole Elseworlds thing as a whole? Or do you think that's a long-term plan where they're going to have the established DC universe and then they're going to put all like the crazy side projects into Elseworlds? What do you think of that?
I think it's super smart. The problem I've always had with DCU is like you get a movie like the Batman or like the Joker, and you're like, how does this play into everything else? This doesn't make sense. Is it going to be a part of something? Or are we going to get crossovers? What's going on? And the fact that they're like labeling it, they're just saying this is a thing that is Elseworlds, it's one-offs, it's not part of canon, is a good way of telling fans what they can expect. So whenever I see something that's going to be in Elseworlds, if it's what they've currently got slated, or if someone comes in the future and says, hey, I really like this character, I think I have a really great story, I want to do a movie about it, and it falls into the Elseworld category, then I'll know walking into that movie theater, I don't got to worry about watching any other movies, which means I can take my girlfriend, and I will be expecting this movie to be so good that it had to stand on its own. It has to stand on its own. It can't rely on any other parts of the DCU. So I think it's smart to have it this way so fans have a clear idea of where their this movie falls in the DCU and what they can kind of expect storytelling wise from it. Because the Batman I thought had great storytelling and was just a great movie overall, and it falls into the Elseworlds category. So any other movie that falls into the Elseworlds category, I'm going to kind of hold it to that standard or expect that kind of level of storytelling. And it's a good way to separate it out without having to worry about being tied down to the rest of the DC franchise for movie directors.
And I think it's a clean plan. I think sort of that's what's they've been saying. Obviously, like the DC comics, there's multiple timelines and stuff, but I think that the struggle with the previous regime, it was like they were just using that as an excuse versus like an actual business strategy and a content strategy. They're like, oh, in the comics there's like 5 Batman versus like, hey, like let's figure out a way to brand these things and make them, but also make these other things. I think the eventual plan, again, before everyone got kicked out, is like they wanted to do an Infinite Crisis type event that will kind of reset everything. But again, I think that was just them saying like, hey, we're gonna give you what you wanted eventually, versus like actual like it was coming. So for me, I think it's their way of saying, hey, like we want to foster an environment where filmmakers can have their own takes on these characters, and that's how you create like long lasting relationships with the brand where people can, they don't get fatigue, like superhero fatigue. Like I think people are getting Marvel fatigue because of the sheer amount of projects that are very like average or below average at this point, and where it seems like it's going nowhere, where you can have something like the DC approach where, hey, like you have something as crazy as Creature Commandos, you have Booster Gold, things. All of these projects do not look like they connect at all. They're saying they connect, and I'm sure there will be some connective tissue and stuff like that, but and I think the person to do that will be Booster Gold, who we would talk about the next hour. This series is actually coming out. I think we talked on Batman a lot, but that's the only other thing with an actual date. So we're getting a Superman movie and a Batman movie in 2025. Superman in July, the Batman Part 2 in October of 2025. Booster Gold will be an HBO Max series, which, if you don't know the character, comes from the future, is a loser, steals some technology. I think this and the Lantern series are going to be very important to the larger universe. Whereas it'll be cool to see Booster kind of in these very important moments in the DCU, and how they kind of come back into it. We've talked about Booster at least of the close to 100 episodes of the podcast, about like 99 of them. So we'll keep it short and sweet on that. You guys know we're really excited for that. Something that was really surprising is this Supergirl movie, Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow, just because this story literally is less than a year old. It's a 12-issue maxi series written by Tom King. And I don't know if you guys read, but there's actually like a brain trust of DC people. Drew Goddard, who has been in more universes than you could count. He created or was a part of the team for Daredevil very early on. Was a part of the Spider-Man universe, developing a Sinister Six movie, and is now in the DC universe. So I think eventually he's going to get a movie to direct. Tom King is a part of that brain trust, and I think like one more person. I think Jeremy Slater, who's done a lot of stuff. I think like Umbrella Academy at one point wrote a draft of Fantastic Four. So this is interesting. I wonder if they're going to keep Sasha Kaye, who plays Supergirl in The Flash. I didn't read this book, so I know people really love it, but this is one of those things where I was like, I don't know if you really need it. But it does, it's a true grit type story, and I think it does give DC something a little bit different than Marvel has, and that is really important. I think people want the cohesion that Marvel has, but they also want something different. Just because, again, I think with Marvel, we are getting to the point where we're all getting sick of it. What do you guys think?
Personally, I'm not. I have basically no interest in Supergirl, but I know that there's a lot of material out there with Supergirl. They had the TV show. Now they're trying to do this, and it to me
Stop trying to make Supergirl happen, DC.
that's you actually you actually pulled the thought out of my head exactly. I was actually just about to say that, but I for me as a person who has basically no interest in it, I feel like if they just take that concept and put a little bit more production value into it, they could make it work. Because the thing that always bothered me about the Supergirl stuff is that it's just very cheap. Even when she had her own movie back in, I think it was the 80s, the Supergirl movie, they had her fighting an invisible monster because they couldn't afford an actual monster for her to fight. So she fights an invisible monster. And now that they're actually taking it seriously, it has potential, because before it just kind of felt like CW-ish, and not to insult those CW shows, but they do feel a little cheap at times. And
they
now
are
that you
cheap.
can actually, well, yeah, and that's why they feel cheap. So if you actually take the concept seriously, you can actually bring a lot of new people on board, and they might even get me on board. Who knows? So yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
And this, what's interesting is that it's a new story. So, I think this is your guys' cues to start reading the comics, because it seems like some of these stories are being ripped straight from them, which I think is dope. So, Troy, you were going to say something.
I think it's also dope that they're ripping them straight from the comics. That's like the source material for all of this. And we have both said for a long time, yeah, Marvel makes better movies, but DC has better comics. And if we're pulling from like the A-list material to try and make A-list movies, there's no better formula. So, and it's just double dipping for DC. Like, DC's at a really cool point where they can pull the stories from the comics and people know they're great comics, or Marvel's a little bit on the other side of, we've got all these great movies and that's where we're making a lot of money. We've got to make new comics, have these characters be in the comics so they can be in the movies. So it's the other side of the coin right now for DC. So I'm excited to see what they do for Supergirl, but I'm with Mike. I'm not like their target audience. Well, maybe I am because I'm not bought in. I'm definitely going to go see it, but I'm not going to be like, guys, tickets are on sale. We've got to buy it now or it's going to sell out. I'm not going to be like a Taylor Swift fan for Supergirl for it.
Let's get those Ticketmasters. Yes, Swamp Thing. This is my opportunity to get on my soapbox and say, hey, you shouldn't make a Swamp Thing movie because you had an amazing show. So just make that again for season 2. So the Swamp Thing show was on DC Infinite when that app first came out, and the series Titans, Doom Patrol, and Swamp Thing was out. Swamp Thing was the best show out of those things but it also was the most expensive. So it got canceled right before, I think, as soon as episode 1 aired on the app. It's a fantastic series produced by James Wan, I believe. So let's get James Wan to make a Malignant style Swamp Thing movie, which would be 1, hilarious, 2, scary, 3, original. So Swamp Thing is very important. This is called Gods and Monsters, and the only other monster thing we've seen is Creature Commandos. So I think this will have an important factor in it, and it'll be cool if it sets up Justice League Dark, which is something they've tried to set up for, I don't know, 15 years.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's pretty much it. What's interesting is, what's saying is like, hey, Blue Beetle and Aquaman are the first movies a part of this kind of like new DCU. Like also, I think this is very interesting. Gunn has called, obviously he's a homer, so but he's called The Flash probably one of the greatest superhero movies ever made. So that's really exciting. That's part of one of the reasons why they haven't canceled it. And going back to kind of Ezra, Safran said Ezra is completely committed to their recovery. We are fully supportive of that journey they are on right now. When the time is right, when they are ready to have that discussion, we will all figure that best path forward. Which is again a nice way of saying right now we can't fire them, but eventually we're gonna have that discussion.
Yeah, because there's no mention of the Flash at all in any of this for good reason. But
yeah, yeah. Let me see. Yeah, I think what they talked about with the series, also like going back to the approach, is like we don't want the series to feel in any way like stepchildren or lesser than. It's just another way to tell a story. Um, and I think that's kind of speaking to it. Here the comment about Henry Cavill. Obviously, DC very famous for its characters, but very famous for its actors getting into trouble. Which Zachary Levi was in trouble a little bit for their tweets the other day. And Gunn was saying like, "Hey, I can't change my plans every time an actor says something crazy or something I don't agree on," which is funny. And then in this part, they talk about Elseworlds, which what will fall into that is the Batman, the Joker, Todd Phillips Joker sequel, and they are still developing Ta-Nehisi Coates' Black Superman project. And it's not the Gunverse, which is fine. Not every character is really fit for those kind of like outcast jokes and stuff like that. So that's good. So overall, that's kind of it in terms of like what they are planning and stuff. Obviously, James Gunn put out this fun little video on his socials, which is really cool. That gives it much more of a personal and fan touch. And I think the overall message is like, hey, we know this is a mess. We're hoping to clean that up. But overall, are you guys excited for this slate? I know I am because there are things that I didn't quite expect. I didn't expect them to announce basically a Batman and Robin movie. I didn't expect Creature Commandos, whatever that is. Booster Gold,
yeah,
I know, is one of the top requested things that they have. So it'll be interesting to see that because I'm really excited for that.
For me, the most exciting thing is the fact that they paired an experienced director who loves the material with a lifelong producer who's like much more experienced with the studio side of development. And that's a really good combo because I feel it will avoid the pitfalls that they were having earlier, where even Gunn himself said it that they were just giving out these licenses like candy. And when you have a team like that, where you have a person who really cares about what they're making, and then the other person is on the studio side who can tell them what they can and cannot do, and there's a good interplay there, it'll really help the shows feel genuine because there's actual work being put into them from people who actually care. So that's my favorite part of the whole thing. It's not just one person being in charge of everything. And I know Kevin Feige is kind of like that, but he's one in a million, one in a billion. And in order to emulate what they're trying to do, the combo that they have here is really good. So they 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 have they have everything they need to make this work. And if they mess it up, it's really only going to be on them, or unless the studio decides to sell again, and then it's going to be out of their control. But
Which is very likely.
overall, which is very likely. But overall, I mean, they have everything they need. So I know I'm the hater in chief, but this is their game to lose. They have it's a winning formula here, so I'm very much looking forward to it.
I
Yeah.
agree. I think Discovery bought this studio, bought Warner Brothers with a very specific purpose. It was failing so bad under AT&T and AT&T wanted to offload it, and they bought it and cut a whole bunch of stuff. They're like, this is crap, or we need a tax cut. And I think they're ready to invest in, get their money back, and say, hey, this is going to be our content king for maybe the next 10 to 20 years or so. So let's see how they make it happen.
Exciting. In the end, what's gonna make this live or die is the quality of the content. So we'll find out when we see Creature Commandos. I mean, I think the reality is like Superman will definitely be the thing that makes or breaks this universe. You know, the Trinity is so important to the brand, the comics, and everything. And you saw with the Snyderverse sort of the reason that all crumbled really was because, you know, the Superman movie didn't succeed. You know, when you don't have sort of your beacon, your North Star working, the rest of it kind of crumbles. But this was great. This was a great discussion. Obviously, we're really excited. You know, you guys can like, comment, subscribe. Tell us what you're most excited for. There's a lot to kind of take in. Tell us your theories, what you think the first chapter means, where it's going to go. And with that, bada boom.
Bada boom.